You can have the shed. On the worst Tuesday of my life. With his mother beside him. And the judge rolled into one. He said it casually. The way you'd offer someone the last bread roll at dinner. Not because you're generous. Because you're already full. As if a rusted metal shed was some kind of parting gift I should be grateful for. His mother Lorraine actually smiled when he said it. Not a warm smile. Not even a polite one. The kind of smile that says the chess game is over. You didn't even know you were playing. She folded her hands in her lap, like a woman watching the final scene of a movie she'd been writing for years. I was 31 years old. I had been married for 4 years, and I was standing in a kitchen I'd painted sage green myself. 3 coats. The primer didn't take the first time. Derek said he was too busy to help. I'd helped pay for that house every single month. And now I was being told that a tool shed full of old papers and cobwebs was my share of everything. Take it or leave it, Derek added. He leaned back in his chair like a man who'd just offered a fair deal. He couldn't understand why anyone would hesitate. My attorney says you're not entitled to much more. Not with the way the assets are structured. I looked at him. I looked at the man I'd married at 27. The man who used to bring me coffee in bed. He left little notes in my lunch bag. He once drove 45 minutes in a rainstorm because I mentioned wanting a specific kind of soup from that one place near the interstate. That man was gone. In his place was someone who'd learned to talk like his mother and think like his attorney. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, although in hindsight it might have been the funniest moment of my life, but because my mother had warned me about this exact moment on my wedding day. She'd pulled me aside in the bathroom of the venue. I was in my dress, veil pinned, mascara freshly applied. Mom had a champagne glass in one hand and her lucky lipstick in the other. The shade was called Dangerous Territory. She'd been buying it for 20 years. They discontinued it. She had to order it from a woman in North Carolina who stockpiled old cosmetics. Baby, she said, fixing a stray hair on my forehead. I love you. I think Derek is nice. But if that boy ever makes you cry more than he makes you laugh, you call me. I don't care what time it is. I don't care if it's Christmas. You call me and I'll be there before you hang up. It was 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. I called her at 2:48. She picked up on the first ring. Like she'd been waiting. Like she'd always been waiting. But to understand why that rusted shed changed everything, why it turned Derek's smug little speech into the biggest mistake of his entire life, I need to go back to the beginning. I met Derek Caldwell at a friend's engagement party when I was 26. The party was at a rooftop bar downtown. The kind of place with string lights and overpriced cocktails. The DJ played the same 12 songs on a loop. Like he was being held hostage by a very specific playlist. Derek was standing near the railing, nursing a beer, watching the sunset like he had nowhere else to be. He wasn't the loudest guy in the room. He wasn't the one telling stories or buying rounds. He was the one leaning against the railing, half smiling, noticing things. That's what got me. The noticing. He noticed when I couldn't reach the garnish tray at the bar. He noticed when my friend said something that hurt and I pretended it didn't. He noticed my shoes were new because I kept shifting my weight. Those are going to hurt by 9 o'clock, he said. They already hurt at 7, I said. He laughed. It was a good laugh. The kind that doesn't perform for anyone. By our second date, he remembered my coffee order. By the third, he remembered my mother's birthday. By the fourth, he'd won my mother over with a homemade pie. Cherry. He'd asked me what her favorite was. Then he actually made it from scratch, including a lattice top that looked like it belonged in a magazine. My mother ate 2 slices and said nothing. Later in the kitchen, she told me, he's polite. That's a good start. Let's see if polite holds up under pressure. She looked at me the way she always does. Like she knows something I haven't learned yet. It didn't hold up, but polite lasted long enough to convince me that it would. That's the cruelest trick a person can play. Being exactly who you need them for exactly long enough to make you believe it's real. Then showing you who they were all along. So gradually that you question your own memory before you question theirs. The first year of marriage was beautiful. We bought a small house together. Nothing fancy. 2 bedrooms. 1 bathroom that we pretended was charming and not just inconvenient. A kitchen with a window that looked out onto oak trees. They turned gold every October. The neighborhood was quiet. The kind of quiet where you hear crickets at night, The neighbor's dog barked at squirrels every single morning at exactly 6:15 a.m. I named that dog Gerald. I never learned his real name. Gerald and I had a routine. He barked. I made coffee. The world continued. Derek worked in commercial real estate, lease negotiations, property valuations. The kind of work that sounds boring until someone tells you how much money moves through a single deal. I worked as a paralegal at a mid-sized firm, the invisible machinery that keeps legal processes moving. Between us, we weren't rich, but we were comfortable. We split the mortgage. We split the groceries. We split everything 50-50 like two adults who respected each other. At least that's what I believed. Derek's father, Harold, had been an engineer. A brilliant one, apparently. Though you wouldn't know it from talking to him. Harold was the quietest person in any room. He communicated primarily through nods, raised eyebrows, and the occasional deeply specific observation. The kind that made you realize he'd been paying attention to everything you thought nobody noticed. He worked for decades at an industrial company. He designed valve systems for oil and gas refineries. The kind of engineering that nobody thinks about until something explodes. At which point everyone wishes they'd paid more attention to the guy who designed the valves. Harold retired early, lived modestly, drove the same truck for 17 years, wore the same 3 flannels in rotation, in that shed at the back of his property. The one that would later become my so-called generous divorce settlement. I liked Harold. We didn't talk much. But when we did, he said things that stayed with me. Once, at a family dinner, Lorraine was going on about how Derek needed a more impressive car for his business image. Image matters, she said, pointing her fork for emphasis. People judge you by what you drive. That's not shallow. That's reality. Harold looked at me, not at her, and said, "The most valuable things don't look like much from the outside." I smiled. He went back to his meatloaf. That was Harold. Another time, Thanksgiving. He found me alone in the kitchen doing dishes while everyone else watched the game. He picked up a towel and started drying. We didn't speak for several minutes. Then he said, almost to himself, "My son got his mother's eyes. I keep hoping he didn't get the rest of her." I didn't know what to say to that. I still don't. But I think about it more than almost anything else anyone has ever said to me. There was another time. It was a Saturday in July. Derek was at a conference. Lorraine was at her book club. I'd driven out to the property to drop off a casserole dish Lorraine had left at our house. Harold was in the shed. The door was open. I could see him bent over a workbench covered in paper. He had a mechanical pencil behind one ear and a magnifying glass in his left hand. I knocked on the door frame. He looked up, not startled, just aware, like a man who always knew when someone was nearby. He just chose not to acknowledge it unless it mattered. "Jenna," he said, "come in. Watch the third step. Boards loose." I stepped inside. It was the first time I'd ever been in the shed. The air smelled like graphite and old paper. Shelves lined every wall. Not messy shelves. Organized shelves. Each bin labeled. Each folder standing upright in neat rows. "What are you working on?" I asked. He held up a drawing. Intricate lines. Cross-sections. Measurements so precise they looked like they'd been done by a machine. "Pressure relief system," he said. "Version 14. He set it down. The first 13 had a flaw in the gasket seal. Took me 11 years to figure out what it was. 11 years? Good engineering isn't fast. It's patient. Most people give up around version 3. I looked at the shelves. The bins. The decades of quiet work. "Does Derek ever come in here?" I asked. Harold didn't answer right away. He picked up his pencil, set it down again. Then he said, "My son thinks value is something you can see from the road." He looked at me. "You came inside." I didn't understand then what he meant by that. I understand now. He walked me to my car that day. He didn't say much else. But as I opened the door, he touched my arm. Just briefly. The way someone does when they want to say something important but aren't sure the words exist yet. "Take care of yourself, Jenna." That was the last time I saw him standing. He died 2 years into our marriage. Heart attack. Quick and quiet. That's what everyone said Harold would have wanted. Derek inherited the property. The house. The land. And the shed. He never cleaned out the shed. Never even opened it. Just Dad's old junk, he told me. Patent applications he never finished. Notebooks full of drawings nobody cares about. I nodded. I had no reason to question it. Harold was a quiet man who worked with his hands. His son said his papers were worthless. I believed his son. That was my first mistake, trusting Derek's assessment of his own father. But it would take me 3 more years to realize that Derek couldn't see value in anything that didn't look like money. The second year of our marriage, Lorraine started coming around more. At first it was weekly, Sunday dinners. She'd bring a casserole and a running commentary on everything. My hairstyle, my housekeeping, the way I folded towels. You fold them in thirds? Interesting choice. I've always done halves. Most people do halves. But you do you. Then it was every other day. She'd stop by just to check in. That really meant she wanted to inspect the house, since her last visit. Then she got a key. Derek gave it to her without asking me. She's my mother, Jenna. She should be able to come and go. This is our home, Derek. Both of ours. And she's my family. What's the problem? The problem was that Lorraine used that key the way some people use social media. To surveil, judge, and occasionally leave passive-aggressive evidence that she'd been there. She rearranged my entire spice cabinet while I was at work once. Alphabetized everything. Left a handwritten note on a linen napkin that said, "You're welcome, sweetheart." It was giving me anxiety. I showed the note to my mom. Mom read it. Read it again. Put it down carefully. The way you put down something you're trying very hard not to light on fire. Then she said, "Save that note." Why? Because someday you might need to show a pattern. I thought she was being dramatic. I saved it anyway. I saved all of them. That night I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling. Derek was asleep beside me. He slept on his back now, arms crossed over his chest. He used to sleep curled toward me, one arm draped over my waist, like he was holding on even in his dreams. Now he slept like a man on a business trip, present but separate, sharing a bed the way strangers share a subway car. I tried to remember the last time he'd asked me how my day went. Not the polite version, the real version, where you actually stop and listen to the answer, where you look at the person and not at your phone. I couldn't remember. That scared me more than anything else. Not the fighting, not the distance, not even Lorraine rearranging my kitchen, but the fact that I couldn't remember the last time my husband was curious about my life. There's a kind of loneliness that only exists inside a marriage. It's worse than being alone, because when you're alone, you know it. When you're lonely in a marriage, you spend half your time wondering if you're making it up. I wasn't making it up. Lorraine got bolder. She started leaving things. Not just notes, objects. A set of dish towels she considered more appropriate. That said, Chapter 9. You Need It. A framed photo of Derek from when he was a boy. She placed it on my nightstand, on my side of the bed, where my book used to sit. She moved my book to the hallway shelf. When I moved it back, she moved it again. We did this 3 times before I realized it wasn't about the book. It was about the shelf, and the nightstand, and the kitchen, and the house. Everything I touched, she rearranged. Everything I chose, she replaced. She was erasing me one shelf at a time, and Derek didn't notice. Or he noticed and decided it wasn't worth mentioning. Which is worse. By year 3, Derek had changed. It wasn't sudden. It was like watching a Polaroid develop in reverse. The picture getting fainter. Harder to see, until you weren't sure what you were looking at anymore. He stopped splitting things equally. One day he came home and announced he'd opened a separate account. For business expenses, I wasn't allowed to access it. "It's just cleaner this way," he said. "My accountant recommended it. Your accountant or your mother?" He didn't answer. Which was an answer. He started staying late at the office. He started taking calls in another room with the door closed. He started agreeing with Lorraine about everything, including things he'd previously disagreed with, things he'd once rolled his eyes at, things he'd once mocked quietly while doing the dishes. "Mom thinks we should refinance the house under just my name," he said one evening. He wasn't looking up from his laptop. I set down the knife I was using to chop onions. "Derek, I pay half this mortgage." "Right, but technically the income disparity means it's better for taxes if..." "The income disparity? I make more than you, Jenna. That's not an insult. It's just math." He looked at me the way you look at a child who doesn't understand long division. Patient. Condescending. The specific kind of patience that is actually contempt wearing a turtleneck. Jenna, I'm trying to help us. Us? I repeated the word, but I heard me. And more importantly, I heard her. I sat on the bathroom floor with my phone and searched signs your spouse is financially isolating you. Every single article described my marriage. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on the bathroom floor with the tiles cold against my back. I read until my eyes burned. Financial isolation. Coercive control. Asset concealment. These were clinical terms for the thing that had been happening in my own house. I folded laundry and made coffee and convinced myself that every marriage had rough patches. At some point, I started shaking. Not from the cold tile. From recognition. Every article I read described a different woman. Different name. Different city. Different husband. But the same story. The same slow erosion. The same quiet theft of autonomy and dignity. One article called it the invisible architecture of control. The walls go up so slowly that you think they've always been there. I thought about my mother. I thought about what she'd said at the wedding. If that boy ever makes you cry more than he makes you laugh. The last time I'd laughed. Really laughed. Not the polite kind. Not the kind you do at dinner parties. The kind that comes from your stomach, where you forget yourself for a second. I couldn't remember. I set my phone down. I pressed my palms against the cool tile. I counted to 10. Then I counted again. I wasn't going to panic. I wasn't going to run. I was going to do what I'd always done when things got hard. I was going to pay attention. Really pay attention. The way Harold paid attention to gasket seals. The way my mother paid attention to the notes. I started paying attention. Really paying attention. The way I should have from the beginning. The mail that disappeared before I got home. I tested it. I signed up for a free magazine subscription using our home address. The first issue never arrived. Neither did the second. On the third month, I signed up again using my work address. It arrived within a week. Someone was intercepting our mail. I had a strong suspicion that someone wore linen napkins like war medals. That stopped arriving. I called the bank. They told me the delivery preference had been changed to electronic only 3 months ago. I hadn't changed it. Derek claimed he didn't remember changing it. Maybe it was automatic, he said. He didn't look up from his phone. Nothing is automatic, Derek. Someone pressed the button. The conversations that went silent when I walked into a room. Derek and Lorraine would be talking. Sometimes quietly. Sometimes with papers spread on the table. And the moment I appeared in the doorway, they'd shift. Not stop. Shift. Like a radio station changing frequency. Just talking about the property taxes, Derek said once. The property taxes did not require the kind of whispering I'd overheard. Derek's phone was suddenly always face down on the table. Or in his pocket. Never on the counter where it used to live. He changed his passcode. He turned off notification previews. He started taking calls outside. Not in the backyard where I could hear. In the garage with the door closed. While he showered, it buzzed. A text from Lorraine. The preview showed one line before the screen went dark. Don't tell her about the après. That was all I saw. But it was enough. Small things. The kind of things you explain away when you love someone. The kind of things that only form a picture when you step back far enough to see. The kind of things that stop being small when you line them up in a row. You realize they're not random. They're a sequence. En plan. You're the only person in the house who wasn't included in the planning. I told my mom everything. We sat in her kitchen, the same kitchen where she'd taught me to make pie crust, where I'd done homework at the counter, where she told me my dad was leaving when I was 11. I didn't plan what to say. I just started talking. Once I started, I couldn't stop. It was like pulling thread from a sweater. One thing led to another, and suddenly I was holding the entire unraveled mess in my hands. I told her about the account. The separate one. I told her about the refinancing. The passcode changes. The garage phone calls. The way Lorraine whispered and then stopped. The text I'd seen. Don't tell her about the après. I told her about the nights I lay awake, wondering if I was crazy. If this was just what marriage looked like. If I was the problem. If everyone's husband stopped looking at them after year 2. If all mothers-in-law had keys and opinions and a talent for making you feel like a guest in your own home. She held me while I cried into her shoulder for 45 minutes. She didn't move. She didn't shift. She held me the way she'd held me when I was 11. When my world broke the first time, she knew how to do this. She'd had practice. When I finally pulled back, she handed me a napkin. Not a tissue. A cloth napkin. Because my mother is the kind of woman who keeps cloth napkins in every room, just in case someone needs to fall apart. She listened to everything. She didn't interrupt. She didn't say, "I told you so," even though she had every right to. When I finished, she poured 2 cups of tea. She sat down across from me. And she said, "I want you to see someone. Not a therapist. Not yet. An attorney. Just to understand your rights. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to file anything. Just know where you stand." She reached into her purse and pulled out a business card. She'd already gotten one. She'd been carrying it. "How long have you had that?" I asked. "Since the spice cabinet," she said. Her name was Beverly Chen. She was 62 years old. She wore reading glasses on a beaded chain around her neck. She had a collection of potted succulents on her windowsill. She'd been divorced 3 times. The first one was practice, she told me during our first meeting. The second was a mistake. The third was a masterpiece of exit strategy. I still send him a Christmas card thanking him for the condo. I liked Beverly immediately. She had a way of listening that made you feel like the most important person who had ever sat in that chair. She didn't take notes while you talked. She watched you and wrote down the 3 things that actually mattered. The rest she remembered. "I've seen 100 of these," she said during that first meeting, "and they all start the same. A woman sits in that chair and tells me she thinks she might be overreacting. Then she describes a situation that would make a federal prosecutor reach for a yellow pad. She leaned forward. "You are not overreacting." Those 4 words. I hadn't realized how badly I needed to hear them until someone said them. She reviewed everything. The joint accounts, the mortgage, Derek's separate account, Lorraine's involvement, the refinancing pressure, the disappearing mail, the notes Lorraine left. "Your husband is building a case to minimize your share," she said. She tapped a pen against a yellow legal pad. "His mother is helping him. This isn't accidental. This is coordinated. They're isolating you financially before they push for a separation. One where you walk away with close to nothing." My stomach dropped. Not because I was surprised. Some part of me already knew. But hearing it said out loud, by a professional, in a room with succulents and a framed photo of 3 cats, made it real. It hadn't been real before. What do I do? Right now? Nothing visible. You keep living your normal life. You don't confront him. You don't tip your hand. You document. You save. You prepare. And when the time comes, you'll be ready. For what? Beverly smiled. It was a smile of a woman who'd done this before. For whatever they think they're going to get away with. I drove home that evening in silence. No radio. No podcast. No phone call. Just the road and the sound of tires and the feeling of something shifting inside my chest. It wasn't hope exactly. It was closer to resolve. The kind of feeling you get when the doctor says the diagnosis is clear and the treatment is known. The hard part isn't over. But the mystery is, I parked in the driveway. I looked at the house. The sage green kitchen I'd painted myself. The window where the oak trees turned gold. The front door that Lorraine walked through whenever she pleased. For the first time, I didn't see a home I was losing. I saw a building I was going to walk out of. On my own terms. With my head up, and my documentation in a locked drawer inside a cookbook on the top shelf that a woman named Lorraine thought was too old to matter. I went inside. Derek was watching something on his laptop. He didn't look up. "Hey," he said. "Hey," I said, and I smiled. Not a warm smile. Not a polite one. The kind of smile that says the chess game isn't over yet. You just don't know it. So that's what I did. For 8 months, I lived a double life. On the surface, I was the same Jenna. Going to work, coming home, making dinner, listening to Lorraine criticize my curtains, my career, and the brand of olive oil I bought at the grocery store. You know, Lorraine said once, inspecting my pantry, "Good olive oil really does make a difference. This is the kind they use at chain restaurants." I smiled. I said nothing. I went to the bathroom and wrote it down. Date. Time. Exact quote. Underneath the surface, I was building a case. Not for a courtroom. For myself, for the day I would need to prove that I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't imagining things, that the ground beneath me was actually shifting, not just my balance. Beverly met with me every 2 weeks, always at her office, never at a restaurant, never anywhere someone might see us. Discretion isn't drama, she told me. It's strategy. Right now, your greatest advantage is that they think you're not paying attention. She was right. Derek and Lorraine had spent years treating me like background noise. A person who existed in the house but didn't count as a full participant in any decision that mattered. They never imagined that the woman they'd been talking over was taking notes. Beverly gave me homework. Not the legal kind. The emotional kind. Write down 3 things you felt today, she said during our second meeting. Not what happened. What you felt. There's a difference. I wrote invisible, tired, angry. The next week, scared, sad, clear. The week after that, ready. That was the word that surprised me. I didn't know I was ready until I wrote it down and realized it was true. Every deposit into Derek's hidden account, I tracked them. Beverly taught me how. Public records, she said, adjusting her glasses. You'd be amazed what people think is hidden. It's really just poorly organized. Derek had moved over $47,000 into a separate account over 6 months, not all at once. He was smarter than that. Small amounts. Irregular timing. A few hundred here. A couple thousand there. Like he was slowly draining a bathtub 1 cup at a time. Hoping I wouldn't notice the waterline dropping. I noticed every conversation where Lorraine pressured me to sign documents, I logged them. She came to the house one Wednesday afternoon. She had a folder, her reading glasses, and a rehearsed smile. Jenna, dear, Derek and I were talking about simplifying the property titles. Just a housekeeping thing. You just need to sign here. I looked at the document. It was a quitclaim deed. Signing it would have removed my name from our house. I knew what it was because I was a paralegal. Lorraine did not know I knew what it was, because Lorraine had never once asked me about my job. Sure, I said. Let me read through it first. I'll sign it tonight. I photographed every page. Sent them to Beverly. Never signed. When Lorraine asked about it a week later, I said I must have misplaced it. You know me, I said. I gave the kind of helpless smile that Lorraine expected from someone she considered beneath her. She brought another copy. I misplaced that one too. After the 3rd time, she stopped bringing copies and started bringing Derek. Just sign the papers, Jenna. Mom's trying to help us. Help us with what? With organizing our finances. She has experience with this. Dad left things messy. She doesn't want us to make the same mistakes. I looked at him. I wanted to say, your father was the most organized man I've ever met. He labeled his pencils. But I didn't say that. I said, okay, I'll look at it this weekend. I never looked at it. And I never signed. Forgot to include me in a financial decision. I wrote it down. The insurance policy he changed without telling me. The investment account he closed. He moved it to a brokerage I'd never heard of. The automatic payments that quietly redirected from our joint account to his private one. I photographed mail before it disappeared. I set up a camera, a small one, the kind that looks like a phone charger. I put it in the hallway near the front door. Beverly said it was legal, as long as it was in my own home, and I didn't record audio. I watched Lorraine take 3 pieces of mail on a Tuesday. She tucked them into her purse, with the casual precision of a woman who had done this many times before. I backed up text messages to a cloud account only I could access. I kept a journal, handwritten, hidden inside the cover of an old cookbook on the top shelf. Lorraine had declared it too old to be useful. She therefore never touched it. Dates, times, exact quotes, page after page of small betrayals that added up to a very large one. My mom helped. She was my vault. Every piece of evidence, every observation, I told her and she remembered. She kept her own notes. She noticed things even I missed. It was Mom who discovered that Lorraine had quietly added herself as a beneficiary on one of Derek's accounts. Not Jenna's name. Not even Derek's sister. Lorraine herself. She's not protecting him, Mom said. Her eyes narrowed over her reading glasses. She's protecting herself. She's making sure that whatever he gets flows uphill to her. That detail would matter later. More than either of us knew. The Tuesday came without warning. I drove home from work on a perfectly normal day. The radio was playing something by someone I can't remember. I was thinking about whether we had eggs. I walked through the front door. There was Derek, sitting at the kitchen table with Lorraine and a man I'd never met. The man wore a gray suit. He had a leather briefcase. He was already sweating. Yeah, no, Derek said. He stood up with an expression that was rehearsed, right down to the concerned tilt of his head. This is Craig. He's my attorney. Craig nodded. He did not stand. He did not offer to shake my hand. He looked like a man who'd been hired to deliver bad news and hoped it would be over quickly. His tie was slightly crooked. His collar was damp. He kept clicking his pen. Open. Closed. Open. Closed. I noticed all of this. Because that's who I am now. The woman who notices. Lorraine sat perfectly still. Her posture was flawless. Her outfit was pressed. She had a leather planner open in front of her. I could see a checklist, handwritten in blue ink. Several items already crossed off. I wondered which item on that list was me. We need to talk about the future of this marriage, Derek said. He prepared a speech. I could tell. He kept glancing at a folded paper on the table. Lorraine's lips were moving slightly, like she was mouthing along. The highlights: he wanted the house. He wanted the cars. Both of them, including the one I'd been driving for 3 years. He wanted the savings account. He wanted to keep Harold's property in its entirety. House, land, everything. We've assessed the assets and believe this is a fair division, Craig said. He slid a document across the table. He didn't meet my eyes. And what do I get? I asked. That's when Derek said it. The 5 words that would cost him $6.2 million. You can have the shed? Lorraine smiled. That smile. The chess game smile. The checkmate smile. The one she'd been planning since I walked down the aisle. Craig shifted in his chair. A bead of sweat ran down his temple. Derek looked proud of himself. He leaned back. He actually crossed his arms behind his head, like a man who'd just closed the biggest deal of his career. The shed. Harold's old workshop. The rusted metal building at the back of the property. The one nobody had opened in over 2 years. The one full of patent applications nobody cared about and Dad's old junk. I looked at Derek. I looked at Lorraine. I looked at Craig. He was actively studying the ceiling, like it contained the meaning of life. I took a breath. Fine, I said. I'll take the shed. Derek blinked. He hadn't expected me to agree that quickly. Neither had Lorraine. Her smile flickered, just for a second, like a light bulb deciding whether to burn out. That's great, Derek said slowly. That's very mature of you. I'll have my attorney review the papers, I said. You have an attorney? Lorraine asked. It was the first time she'd spoken. Her voice was sharp. Surprised. For 8 months, I said. The room went quiet. I called Beverly from my car. I hadn't even pulled out of the driveway. Then I called my mom. He offered me the shed, I said. Mom was quiet for a moment. Then very carefully. The one with his father's papers? Yes. Another pause. Then, softly. Take it. I already did. Good girl. She didn't explain. Not yet. But I could hear something in her voice I hadn't heard in months. She was smiling. The divorce moved quickly once I stopped fighting. Derek and Craig were confused by how agreeable I was. I didn't contest the house. I didn't fight over the cars. I didn't argue about the savings account. I didn't hire a forensic accountant to trace the hidden money, though Beverly recommended it. Are you sure? Beverly asked. We have enough to challenge the whole thing. I'm sure, I said. She studied me over her reading glasses. You know something I don't. Not yet, I said, but I think my mother does. I asked for 3 things. The shed and all its contents, my personal belongings, my name removed from the mortgage. Derek signed everything with the speed and enthusiasm of a man who thinks he's won the lottery. He didn't read the documents. Not carefully. Not the way a person reads something that matters. He scanned. He flipped. He initialed where Craig pointed. His pen moved like a man signing a hotel check. Quick, confident, careless. Lorraine watched every signature with visible satisfaction. She sat beside him, her hands folded, her chin slightly lifted, the posture of a queen watching a coronation. When it was my turn to sign, I read every word. Slowly, deliberately. not because I needed to. 3 times already. I read slowly because I wanted them to see me reading. I wanted Lorraine to wonder why I wasn't rushing. I wanted Derek to feel the first flutter of something that might have been doubt. If he felt it, he didn't show it. All done, Craig said. He closed his briefcase with the relief of a man stepping off a tightrope. Lorraine brought champagne to the signing. Actual champagne. Not the cheap kind either. She popped it in the parking lot of the attorney's office. The cork bounced off a sedan. Craig pretended to check his phone. Derek laughed. The kind of laugh that comes from a man who doesn't realize the joke is on him. I watched them through the window of Beverly's car. Derek and Lorraine. Toasting in the parking lot. Celebrating what they thought was the greatest heist of their lives. Enjoy that, Beverly said dryly. She started the engine. It's the last thing she'll be celebrating for a while. I didn't understand yet, but I trusted Beverly. And I trusted my mom. 2 weeks after the divorce was finalized, I went to the shed. Mom drove. She showed up at my apartment at 7 a.m. with coffee, gloves, heavy-duty trash bags, 2 flashlights, and a cooler with sandwiches. We might be here a while, she said. The shed was exactly as I remembered. Duste. Cobwebbed. A daddy longlegs, the size of a quarter, had set up residence on the doorframe. It looked offended by our arrival. Inside, the air was thick. It smelled of old paper, machine oil, and something metallic. Copper, maybe, or rust. Shelves lined every wall. They were stacked with old notebooks, manila folders, and plastic bins full of documents. Harold's workbench was still covered in pencil shavings and half-finished sketches. Where do we start? I asked. Mom pointed to a metal filing cabinet in the far corner. Army green. 4 drawers. The kind of thing you'd see in a government office in the 1970s. There, she said. How do you know? She looked at me with an expression I recognized. The one she wore when she was about to tell me something she'd been keeping. Harold told me. I stared at her. Sit down, she said. We sat on overturned plastic crates. Mom took off her gloves. She held her coffee with both hands. And she told me, when you and Derek were dating, she began, Harold and I used to talk. Not often. You know how he was. But every once in a while, at family dinners, when everyone else was in the living room, Harold and I would end up in the kitchen together. He'd dry the dishes. I'd wash. We never planned it. It just happened. She took a sip. He liked you, Jenna. He really did. He said once that you reminded him of someone. A woman engineer who was the smartest person in every room. And the last one to say it. I felt my throat tighten. But he was worried about Derek. He never said it directly. Harold wasn't that kind of man. But one evening, about 6 months before he died, he said something I never forgot. Mom looked at me. He said, if my boy ever loses her, she should have what's in that cabinet. Everything that matters is in there. Promise me. And you promised? I promised. And then I waited. Unless I had to. He said, I'm hoping I'll never need this plan. But I'm an engineer. I always have a backup. My hands were shaking. I stood up, walked to the cabinet, pulled the top drawer. Inside were folders. Dozens of them, each one labeled in Harold's careful handwriting. Patent application dual gate valve system. Approved 1,987. Patent application thermal regulation process. Approved 1,989. Patent application high pressure relief mechanism. Approved 1,991. I pulled out folder after folder. My hands were moving faster than my brain. Patent granted. Patent granted. Patent granted. Each folder was identical in structure. Harold had a system. A tab for the application. A tab for the correspondence. A tab for the approval letter. A tab for the royalties. Every page was dated. Every document was numbered. Every number was correct. This man hadn't just filed patents. He built an archive. The kind of record that would make any accountant weep with joy. The kind that holds up in every courtroom and every audit. And opened it slowly. She ran her finger along Harold's handwriting. Small, precise letters. The penmanship of a man who measured everything twice. He knew, she whispered. He knew what this was worth. And he never told anyone. He told you, I said. She looked at me. Her eyes were red. No. He told me where to find it. That's different. He trusted me with the location. He trusted you with the value. I sat back down on the crate. I held one of the folders against my chest like it was a letter from someone I'd lost. Because it was. Each folder contained the original application, the approval documentation, correspondence with the licensing companies, and meticulous records of every royalty payment going back decades. Harold hadn't just filed patents. He'd built a business. A quiet, invisible, perfectly documented business. It generated income every single quarter. Companies used his designs in oil refineries, chemical plants, and industrial facilities across 3 continents. He'd done it all from a metal shed, called a junk closet, 14 patents total. All approved, all in Harold Caldwell's name, all still active. At the bottom of the last drawer, in a sealed envelope addressed simply to Jenna, was a letter. Harold's handwriting, dated 8 months before he died. Dear Jenna, if you're reading this, then I was right to worry. I'm sorry I couldn't say this to you in person. I'm not good with words when people are watching. These patents are my life's work. They are still active. They generate licensing royalties from 3 major companies. The attorney who manages them is named Martin DeLuca. His card is in this envelope. Everything is in your name now. I transferred the rights through a trust 18 months ago. Derek doesn't know. Lorraine doesn't know. Only Martin knows. And now you. I hope you never need this. But if you do, it's yours. You saw me, Jenna. You're the only one who ever did. Harold, I couldn't read the last 2 lines through the tears. My mom took the letter and finished it for me. She was crying too. Confirmed everything within 2 weeks. His office was downtown. 4th floor. Modest furniture. No artwork on the walls. Just framed patent certificates. Dozens of them. He was in his 70s. Silver hair. A handshake that was firm but careful. The handshake of a man who'd spent his career protecting things that mattered to other people. I've been waiting for this call, he said. Harold told me you'd come eventually. I hoped you wouldn't need to. But Harold was a realist. He planned for outcomes, not hopes. He opened a drawer and pulled out a folder. The same kind Harold used. Manila. Labeled in that same precise handwriting. This one said simply, for Jenna the plan. Inside was a spreadsheet. Handwritten. Every quarter. Every payment. Every license. Going back over 30 years, Harold had tracked every dollar his inventions had earned. In a spiral notebook. With a mechanical pencil. The same way he'd tracked everything else. Patiently. Completely. Without anyone watching. Martin looked at me over his reading glasses. Was the most methodical client I ever had. And the most generous. He could have spent this money. He chose not to. He chose you. Harold's 14 patents were not only active. They were foundational. 3 major companies had been licensing his valve technology for over 30 years. The royalties had been accumulating in a trust account. Harold set it up specifically in Jenna's name. The total value of the patent portfolio was $6.2 million, including accumulated royalties and projected future income. Martin said the words slowly, carefully, like he was handling something fragile. 6.4 million. I called my mom. She picked up on the first ring. 6.2 million, I said. She was quiet for exactly 3 seconds. Then she said, I'll bring dinner. We're celebrating, and I'm buying the good olive oil. The legal process was straightforward. Harold's patents were personal intellectual property. They were held in a trust with Jenna as sole beneficiary. The transfer was completed and notarized before Harold died. The trust assets were never part of Derek's estate. But even if they had been, even if someone tried to argue that the physical documents were marital property, the shed itself had been given to me in the divorce settlement, including, as Craig wrote, all contents therein. Beverly read that phrase and smiled. The way a cat smiles at a bird that just landed on the windowsill. All contents therein, she repeated. Those are Craig's own words. That's the most expensive sentence that man will ever write. Derek found out 3 months later. I know exactly how. A licensing company sent a quarterly statement to Harold's old property address. The house Derek was so proud of keeping. Except the statement was addressed to me. To the trust. To the person Harold had chosen. Derek opened it. Because of course he did. He'd been opening other people's mail for years. He just didn't realize that this time, the mail he opened would show him exactly how much his arrogance had cost him. The statement showed 1/4 of royalties. One single quarter. 38,700美元. I imagine he read that number several times. I imagine Lorraine read it too. I imagine the kitchen got very quiet. The kind of quiet that happens after someone drops a glass. Before anyone moves. When the pieces are still settling on the floor. I imagine Lorraine looked at that number and did the math. Not the money math. The other kind. The kind where you add up every Sunday dinner, every quitclaim deed, every spice cabinet, every champagne cork, and the total comes out to 6.2 million in the wrong column. I imagine Derek looked at his mother. And for the first time in maybe his entire life, he didn't see a woman who had all the answers. He saw a woman who had steered him straight off a cliff. While holding the map, then Derek called me. I didn't answer. He called again. And again. 11 times in 2 days. The first few calls were polite. Controlled. The voice of a man trying very hard to sound reasonable. His hands were probably shaking. By call number 7, the mask was slipping. By call 9, it was gone. He left one voicemail that I saved. I play it sometimes when I need a reminder of exactly who I was married to. Yenna. We need to talk. My attorney says there may have been an oversight in the settlement. Some of Dad's things in the shed might have significant value. This could be a misunderstanding. We should discuss renegotiating. Call me back. An oversight. He called $6.2 million in oversight. I played it for Beverly. She laughed so hard she had to take off her reading glasses. She wiped her eyes with a tissue from a box shaped like a cat. An oversight, she repeated. An oversight. That's like calling a hurricane a light breeze. That's like calling the ocean a puddle. She set her glasses back on her nose. You know what the real oversight was? Marrying a man who thought his father's life work was junk. Because it didn't come with a leather interior and heated seats. Beverly drafted a response. Professional. Brief. Final. The settlement has been executed and finalized. The shed and all contents therein are the legal property of Miss Jenna Caldwell. Any further correspondence should be directed through counsel. No additional communication will be accepted or acknowledged. Derek's attorney Craig tried anyway. They filed a motion to reopen the settlement. They claimed mutual mistake regarding the value of the shed's contents. Beverly wasn't worried. Mutual mistake requires both parties to be mistaken about the same fact, she said. You weren't mistaken. You didn't know what was in the shed. Neither did he. The difference is you didn't claim to know. He's the one who called it Dad's old junk. He valued it at 0. That's not mutual mistake. That's unilateral arrogance. The judge agreed. The hearing lasted 40 minutes. I sat next to Beverly. Derek sat next to Craig. Lorraine sat in the row behind them. She wore a navy blazer. Her posture was rigid. Her jaw was set. She looked like a woman who still believed the system would protect her. Craig presented his argument. He spoke quickly. He cited case law that Beverly later described as wildly irrelevant, was offered under the assumption it contained materials of negligible value. He said the word negligible 4 times. Like repetition could make it true. Beverly stood up slowly. She adjusted her glasses. She opened a single folder. Your Honor, she said. The settlement document was drafted by opposing counsel. The language is clear. All contents therein. Caldwell's team did not request an appraisal. They did not inspect the shed. They did not ask a single question about what was inside. They assumed it was worthless. That assumption was theirs. Not my client's. She paused. My client accepted what was offered. Nothing more. Nothing less. The fact that opposing counsel failed to perform basic due diligence does not entitle them to a second chance. The courtroom was quiet. Derek stared at the table. Craig clicked his pen. Lorraine's jaw tightened so hard I could see the muscles in her neck. The judge reviewed the settlement documents. The judge reviewed the original offer by Derek's legal team. The language was unambiguous. Both parties had been represented by counsel. Ignorance of an asset's value does not constitute fraud. Motion denied. Craig filed an appeal. The appellate court declined to hear it. One of the clerks, Beverly told me later, had actually written in the margin of the internal memo. Petitioner is asking the court to protect him from the consequences of his own contempt for his father's work. I had that sentence framed. It hangs next to my mother's photo in the kitchen. Lorraine stopped posting on social media for 4 straight months. She'd been the woman who popped champagne in the parking lot. She rearranged my spice cabinet. She told me my olive oil was chain restaurant grade. When she finally resurfaced, she'd moved to a smaller apartment across town. Her profile photo changed. It went from a professional headshot to a blurry selfie. It was taken in a studio apartment kitchen. I noticed the olive oil on the counter behind her. Store brand. The same kind she'd once mocked in my pantry. I didn't say anything. But my mom did. She texted me the screenshot with one word. Interesting. Derek, I heard through friends, was renting a condo. A 1-bedroom. The kind of place he once would have called a starter apartment. He'd taken on a second job. Property management on weekends. The same kind of work he used to describe as beneath someone in his position. A mutual friend told me he'd stopped talking about money. He used to lead with it. Every conversation, every dinner party, the deal he closed, the commission he earned, the car he was planning to buy. Now he talked about weather and traffic and whether the local team would have a good season, the kind of conversation a man has when he's run out of things to brag about. I didn't feel sorry for him. He tried. I sat with it one evening. I tried to access some version of compassion, some memory of the man who drove through a rainstorm for soup. But that man had signed away his father's life work without a second thought and offered me a shed like a consolation prize. Compassion has limits. Mine ended at the kitchen table. The house. The one they'd fought so hard to keep from me. The one Derek insisted was his by right. The one Lorraine had already redecorated in her mind. They had to sell it. Legal fees. 2 attorney retainers. A failed motion to reopen. An appeal that went nowhere. They sold it for less than we paid for it. I didn't gloat. I didn't call Derek. I didn't text Lorraine. I didn't reach out. I didn't post anything online. I didn't need to. The numbers spoke for themselves. They always had. Harold knew that. He was an engineer. Engineers trust numbers more than words. But my mom did send me a photo. She was standing on the porch of my new house, a 4-bedroom craftsman. It had a garden, a porch swing, and a kitchen with actual counter space. She was holding champagne. The text read, "This one's for Lorraine. I had it printed, framed. It hangs in my kitchen next to the window that looks out onto the oak tree in my backyard. I drink my coffee and look at that photo and remember what my mother taught me. Save everything. Trust your gut. And never underestimate a quiet man in a shed." It's been 14 months since the divorce. I wake up in a house I own outright. No mortgage. No Lorraine with a key. No disappearing mail. Martin calls me every quarter to review the licensing revenue. Last quarter was the highest yet. A new company in the Gulf region picked up the thermal patent. "Your father-in-law was ahead of his time," Martin said. "These designs are becoming more relevant, not less." The first night in my new house, I couldn't sleep. Not because I was anxious, because I was listening. No one was going to come through the door without my permission. No one was going to rearrange my shelves. No one was going to open my mail. No one was going to whisper in another room. The silence wasn't empty. It was mine. I got up at midnight. I walked through every room. I touched the walls. I turned on every light. I opened every cabinet. I stood in the kitchen and cried. Not sad tears. The kind of tears that come when your body finally believes what your mind decided months ago. That you're safe. I set up Harold's filing cabinet in my home office. I cleaned every drawer. I polished the handles. It sits next to my desk like a monument. Some people keep trophies. Some people keep awards. I keep a filing cabinet from a man who saw me clearly enough to plan for the worst and hope for the best. Every morning, I open the top drawer and look at the first folder. The one with his letter. I don't read it anymore. I don't need to. I have it memorized. But I look at his handwriting. The small, precise letters. And I remember that someone believed in me before I believed in myself. I still work as a paralegal. I don't have to, but I like my work. I like being useful. I like the structure and the purpose and the feeling of helping someone navigate a system that wasn't built for them. Maybe someday I'll go to law school. Beverly says I'd make a terrifying attorney. I think she means it as a compliment. To tell me that Craig had quietly left his law practice. Took a job in compliance, Beverly said. Apparently his reputation didn't survive being known as the lawyer who gave away $6.2 million in a divorce settlement. I almost felt bad for him. Almost. Mom comes over every Sunday. We cook together. The way we always have. Side by side. She washes. I dry. The same way Harold used to. I don't think she notices the parallel. Or maybe she does and doesn't say. That would be very her. She always brings something she doesn't need to bring. Flowers she cut from her garden. A new kitchen towel she found on sale. Or a bottle of wine that costs exactly $12. She refuses to believe that expensive wine tastes any different. She's probably right. Last Sunday, she brought oregano. A small pot. Already growing. For your windowsill, she said. A kitchen needs a living thing in it. I put it next to the sink. Next to the window with the afternoon light. It's already taller. She also brought a card. Null occasion. With a drawing of a house on it. Inside in her handwriting, I'm so proud of the woman you became. I always was. Even when you couldn't see it. I put it on the fridge. Next to a photo of Harold. The only one I have. It's from Thanksgiving. He's standing in the kitchen. Dish towel over his shoulder. Not smiling exactly. But present. The way only Harold could be. 2 quiet people on my refrigerator. Watching over me from different kitchens. Both of them right about everything that mattered. Last month, I drove out to Harold's old property. Not to the house. Strangers live there now. But to where the shed used to stand. They'd torn it down. There was just an empty concrete pad. Weeds pushing through the cracks. I stood there for a long time. I thought about Harold. A quiet man who spent decades in a small metal building. Drafting ideas that changed an entire industry. A man whose own son called his life's work junk. He never once opened the cabinet to check. A man who looked at his son's young wife and thought, she's the one who'll see this clearly. I don't know if Harold knew what Derek would become. Maybe he hoped for something better, but he planned for something worse. And because of that plan, because of a quiet man, a metal filing cabinet, and a mother who'd been carrying a business card in her purse since the day someone rearranged her daughter's spice cabinet, I'm standing here. Not broken. Not bitter. Not waiting for someone to tell me what I'm worth. Just building. Quietly. Like Harold. If you're listening to this and you recognize any piece of it, the husband who stopped seeing you, the mother-in-law who never started, the feeling of being handed something small and being told to be grateful, I want you to know. The thing they dismiss might be the thing that saves you. The thing they overlook might be worth more than everything they fought to keep. And sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one who saw you most clearly. Come sit with me again sometime. I'll leave the porch light on.